Hello and welcome to La Rosa Reads. I'm Denise La Rosa, and today I am giving you 5 nonfiction audiobook recommendations. Let's talk books. Audiobooks are an interesting endeavor for your girl. I prefer reading print copies of books. Audiobooks are something that I can get into, but it has to have a lot going for it, and I typically read no more than 1 audiobook per month. So, what is leading me to recommending these 5 nonfiction audiobooks? Well, they have to fit the following criteria. First and foremost, they have to be engaging. They have to be pleasing to my ear. They have to have been rooted in a very focused, purposeful story or exploration. They have to also be about topics or individuals that I find interesting, that I'm curious about. And so all of these top 5 nonfiction audiobooks fit those criteria. They meet them, they exceed them, and I think if you haven't already listened to them, you absolutely should. So let's talk about these books in order from my number 5 top favorite nonfiction audiobook listen to my all-time favorite as of this very moment. Because as we know, as we book lovers know, the journey is ever evolving and we're always adding new favorites to our list. Coming in at number 5 is my very first 5-star read of 2024, and it is titled The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin has a very meditative approach. He even has some chimes, some bells ringing to help the listener center themselves as they are listening to Rick Rubin's words of wisdom about the creative process. I love how he starts off by letting the listener know that you are a creator. We all are, because Rick Rubin, who is a famous producer, a famous music producer, is like the ultimate creator as far as, society's view, right? But what about me or you, the everyday person who maybe isn't famously known, or a millionaire who's known for being a creator? Well, he has us all on a level playing field. His voice is so soothing. His exploration of the creative act is so immersive, so thought-provoking. I love me some Rick Rubin, and this book was just a wonderful listening experience. I highly recommend that you listen to this book. Don't read it, but listen. Coming in at number 4 is one of my top 5 all-time favorite authors ever, and it is The Color of Water by James McBride. James McBride takes us on a journey of his life using 2 wonderful narrators. I love the setup of this audiobook because it is a memoir about James McBride, and it has his mother at the center of the story, and rightfully so. His mother is a Jewish woman who raised 12 biracial children all on her own in a predominantly Black neighborhood in New York City, and she is a force to be reckoned with. The narrators of this book do an excellent job of portraying James McBride. There's a man narrating his part, and the chapters go back and forth between him, James McBride's narrator, and the narrator that portrays James McBride's mother. Of hearing both perspectives of the same timeline. I love how interwoven into James McBride's story, his mother is sharing her story and how it informed the way that she raised her children and the choices that she made that ultimately had a profound impact on her 12 children, all 12 of whom are super successful. It's so pleasing to the ear, and I found myself smiling. I found myself laughing out loud. I found myself, shedding a tear or two. It is an emotional ride like no other. Highly, highly, highly recommend that you listen to this. I don't think reading it would give the story justice. You've got to listen to those voices. I highly recommend The Color of Water on audiobook. Woo! Lenny Kravitz. Okay. This is a little awkward. My husband's my number one. Okay? He's my number one. I have to admit that I admire Lenny Kravitz from afar. He is one worthy of admiring, not just the exterior, most importantly, his soul, his spirit, his energy, his vibe. And I feel like this year, 2024, is the year of Lenny Kravitz. I listened to his memoir, Let Love Rule, several years ago. You guys, it is full of aha moments, full of surprises. Like, one of my favorite surprises is that Lenny Kravitz and Al Roker are cousins. Who thought? Another surprise is that Lenny Kravitz and Tisha Campbell were a hot item in their teens. They've known each other since before they were known to the world as entertainers. He is just someone who's lived such a full and continues to live such a full, eclectic life with no apologies. He is unapologetically who he is, and his parents have a lot to do with that. A Jewish father, a Black mother who who was one of the stars on The Jeffersons, that sitcom that so many knew and loved in the 70s and early 80s. And I just tell you, Lenny Kravitz's voice is just, I'm talking about singing voice. I'm talking about his talking voice, his speaking voice was just so soothing. It was almost like I was listening to a meditation, and he just had this forthright yet warm way of telling his story that was so enthralling. You've got to listen to it, even if you're not a huge fan of Lenny Kravitz yourself, which how can you not be? But I ain't judging. But even if you don't own a single Lenny Kravitz album, you've got to listen to this because, like I said, it's full of so many words of wisdom. And also, it's nostalgic because he's journeying through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, his romantic relationship with Lisa Bonet. It is a time to be had. Check it out if you haven't already. All right, we're getting closer. And my runner-up for a highly recommended audiobook listen is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. Oh my goodness, this narrative is such an exquisite and genius way of talking about the Great Migration in America. I'm talking to you about the moment in American history, countless numbers of Black people, Black American citizens made the choice, the sacrifice to move up north for better opportunity, equality, better treatment, and what they would find was almost like that saying, the grass isn't always greener, it's just another shade of green. It was so sweeping, deeply moving how the author spent years with these individuals who firsthand experienced the Great Migration, who took that journey north, and how that decision has impacted not just their lives of their relatives for generations to come. I was so enthralled. I was so engaged. I hung on to every word, and the talent of those narrators who were telling these stories, who were narrating this wonderful piece. It's a masterpiece. It's a piece of our history, so beautifully told. It was just, everything about it was top notch. It was stellar. Stellarly researched, stellarly written, stellarly performed by the narrators. And it's a thick book. It's a chunker. And I think that if you were reading it alone without listening as well, you could lose the essence. You could lose the magic. You could lose the stories, quite frankly, of these four individuals. And so for that reason, I highly recommend you listen to The Warmth of Other Suns. And what could be number one, right? What could be my number one nonfiction audiobook recommendation? Well, this is a story all about how my life got twisted upside down. So I'd like to take a minute. Just sit right there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Prince of Bel-Air. I'm probably the only one laughing at that. But Will Smith, holy moly. Okay. Will Smith's memoir, Whoa. Okay. Now this is going to be huge. We're talking about one of the biggest movie stars known in the world. And I don't say this lightly. I'm being very serious when I say, as someone who grew up with Will Smith from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and even before that with DJ Jazzy Jeff and The Fresh Prince, parents just don't understand, all the way up to the present day, I think his memoir is his greatest piece of art. I really, really, truly do. The way it becomes a full-blown theatrical, musical, artistic experience. He's not just narrating. He even has like a gospel choir singing when he's talking about going to church with his grandma. He has all that makes Will Smith so endearing to us, his personality, the emotional roller coaster, of telling. I feel like he's such a great storyteller, telling his story, but also bringing emotions to that story. It was an experience unlike any I've ever had in terms of my reading and my audiobook listening. I listened to this audiobook prior to the infamous Oscar night with The Slap. And I'm going to tell you something. I was not surprised when that moment happened. I've actually spoken with people who have listened to this audiobook or read it. A lot of have listened, and they weren't surprised either. They understood. They didn't agree. I'm not saying I agree, but they understood because Will Smith shares in his memoir how he has carried a lot of guilt and shame and blame for not being there for his mother, who was abused by Will Smith's father. And he always referred to himself as a coward, and how he still carries that guilt, that emotion with him to this day, despite the fact that he is this mega star. And so I think for that reason and so many more, that's what makes this book so powerful, is that it truly served as a memoir in having you better understand this individual, and therefore better understand individuals who have endured similar life circumstances. That to me is a sign of a masterpiece. I just absolutely loved it for all of those reasons and so much more. I do feel like it's tainted now, given what took place Oscar night a couple of years ago. And that makes my heart sad for the purposes of this work of art that is his audiobook. It makes me sad. I don't wish ill will on any, pun intended? No, not really. On anyone, right? On Will Smith or Chris Rock. And for me, I'm a fan of both. The whole thing is just an unfortunate circumstance, and this audiobook, I think, is worthy of your listening ears. So if you haven't already listened to it, please do, and try to do that with an open mind and an empathetic mind. I'm not saying sympathy. I'm just saying empathetic. There is a difference. All right. Those are my favorite nonfiction audiobooks that I highly recommend. What are some audiobooks that you recommend for your girl? Because I'm always adding on to that TBR. Also, let me know if you would like to know my favorite fiction audiobook recommendations. I might do a video of that if it's something that interests you. And until next time, happy reading or listening. Bye.